Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you all so much for holding on those few minutes. I see more folks are joining us, which means we got our Zoom issue fixed, thankfully, thanks to our awesome team here on this end who has been scrambling to help us let other people in and fix that Zoom glitch. So thank y'all for holding on. I really appreciate it this afternoon. You know, you can do this dozens of times and everything work out, and then it doesn't. So thank you all for understanding. Let's see, more people are joining, and we will go ahead and dive right in. Thank you all for being here to hear these updates this afternoon. We are going to talk a little bit about some of the COVID resources for early childhood this afternoon. We'll also provide some updates around vaccines, business supports, and some grant opportunities. We have some CCAP updates, licensing updates, and we'll end with some upcoming events. We also have a speaker here to join us from LDH, so we're really happy, really grateful to have Teresa Sokol on today. Thanks so much for joining us. And so we will go ahead and dive into our slides.
Hey, I'm Ember, and I've got to confess something. Last Friday, I went out with a guy who's on.
And so we'll start with these COVID-19 resources. Just a reminder about our LDOE COVID-19 landing page and our library linked on our Louisiana Believes website. Our dynamic FAQ that we keep updated on all COVID-19 information for early childhood. We also have a link here for the Office of Public Health Guidelines for Child Care. And just a reminder about our email, LDOE COVID-19 support at la.gov is always available to answer any specific questions that you all might have. The department recently released Believe to Achieve Educational Priorities. This is our priorities plan, and it is serving as the department's roadmap to improving outcomes for all of our state's children. It is aligned around Louisiana's 6 critical goals and names out some new priorities that directs LDOE's efforts as we work toward achieving the critical goals. You'll notice that early childhood, of course, is a really important part of this priorities plan as we look to our future endeavors and our key actions and initiatives as a department. So we invite you all to take a look at LDOE's new priorities plan, Believe to Achieve.
Without any communication or warning, Pan Am Flight 914 disappeared from the radar screen.
And we do have some vaccine updates today. On February 22nd, Louisiana expanded vaccinations to include priority group 1B Tier 2. Well, is inclusive of our 12 educators as well as our early childhood educators. And so they're all included in phase 1B Tier 2. This includes support staff, custodial, transportation, kitchen, and any other staff who are all eligible for the vaccine under this priority group. Vaccine distribution is occurring at the local level, and LDH has published a list of vaccination sites that are linked here on the slide. Back on February 19th, we sent providers an email that you all should have received containing information regarding the vaccine distribution that opened on February 22nd. And so I am really once again so grateful to have Dr. Sokol on the phone with us today. Welcome to our early childhood provider webinar. And we are so happy to have you on to give us an update from your end around vaccinations.
Hi, thanks, Jenna.
Can y'all hear? Hi, Dr. Sokol, we can't hear you. Are you joined on another device? You're joined on 2 devices?
Okay, can you hear me now? Okay. So what I was saying, sorry about that. Muting and unmuting is always a challenge. But I'm an epidemiologist. I'm not a physician. Please just everybody call me Teresa. And I'm going to try to share my screen, Jenna, but it's saying that I can't do it. I think because someone else is sharing. Okay.
Give it a try now, Teresa. Is that working for you?
Yes.
Perfect.
Okay. Y'all see my PowerPoint?
Yes, we sure can.
Okay, great. So, so my name is Teresa Sokol. I'm the acting state epidemiologist for the state of Louisiana. Now, I am not a vaccine expert. So if there are very specific, I've worked with a lot of vaccine preventable diseases and made a lot of vaccination recommendations, but might have to get back to you if you've got very specific questions, for example, about the components in the vaccine, that sort of thing. But I'm just going to give you a quick update, and we'll see. Just go from there. Feel free to stop and ask me any questions as we go. Okay, so just a quick overview. As of March 3rd, this was the data from yesterday. Worldwide, we had over 115 million cases and 2.5 million deaths. In the U.S., almost 30 million cases and 517,000, more than 517,000 deaths. And in Louisiana, we've had 432,000, more than that, cases and more than 9,600 deaths. Here, this is just a little bit of an epi curve where you can see cases by day that have occurred, and you can see Louisiana has had 3 very distinct surges. Right now, I will tell you, we have come down from the largest, on a statewide level, the largest surge, but we are seeing some potential both nationwide and within Louisiana, some sort of a flattening of this downward trajectory. And so it's a little bit concerning. We need to watch it very closely to make sure that we're not moving into another period of an increasing trend. I do want to talk about show a little bit of a picture of the vaccinations. So this is for national data, and you can see that the total, I think it's easiest just to look at the percent of the total population. Almost 16% of the total U.S. population have received at least 1 dose, and 8.1%, just over 8%, have received 2 doses, so have been fully vaccinated. And here's Louisiana data. This is as of yesterday. I think it's been updated as of noon, and I'm sorry I don't have the updated data. But what you can see here is that we've basically administered a total of over 1 million vaccines within Louisiana. About 15% of our population here has received at least 1 dose, and about 8% has received full 2 doses. So I wanted to go a little bit into the process for vaccine testing. Just a very quick overview. There are different phases to trials because it is very important, and this is for a new medication or for a new vaccine, it's extremely important to make sure that it is both safe and effective. And so first of all, we start with phase 1 to look at the safety, and you're starting with a small number of people. These are not going to include people who, for example, have underlying medical conditions, that sort of thing, because at the very beginning, you're just making sure it's safe. And once you know it's safe for people, then you can move into phase 2. You can expand to larger numbers of people, and you can split them into different groups, and you stratify them according to age so that you can see how it might act differently in different groups of people. In the phase 3 trials, that's when you give the vaccine to thousands of people. And for the 3 vaccines that are currently authorized for use here, they have been tested in between, I think, 30 to 45,000 people, depending on the vaccine. So we're talking about thousands and thousands of individuals. And you compare people who've been given a placebo injection to people who have been given the vaccine, and that's where you're really going to see what the benefits are and what the efficacy levels are to make sure that that it's both safe and that it's effective. Because in order to become authorized for use, and all of these vaccines right now that are authorized for use in the U.S. are authorized under an emergency use authorization. This is actually the same with all of the COVID tests, because we needed to move quickly, and so it's a little bit of a different process in this regard, but I can tell you that the process for evaluating the actual vaccine has remained exactly the same. There have been no shortcuts there in the clinical trials at all. So in order for a vaccine to become authorized for use under emergency use authorization, basically what they're looking to see is, can the pathogen, can the disease cause a really serious illness, or is it can be a life-threatening condition, which we absolutely know is true from the data we've just seen for COVID. Is it reasonable to believe that the product is effective at preventing the disease? Do the potential benefits outweigh any potential risks? And is there some sort of already approved alternative that's available that, that could do the same thing? And, they really need to prove a certain level of efficaciousness. Needs to be at least 50%, the efficacy level should be at least 50% in this case against preventing symptomatic COVID-19 disease. And then basically there are standards for the safety data, that you have to have collected information about adverse events on a sufficient number of people and followed them for at least 1 month after being vaccinated, so that you really know that these folks, that you can really trust the safety. I'll tell you this, a lot of people have asked, how did these vaccines get approved so quickly? It oftentimes will take years. And there are 2 really important reasons that sped up this process. One is because one of the most time-consuming parts of this process is recruiting the people who are going to be participants in this clinical trial. And usually it's the manufacturer that is going to do this all on their own, right? And when you're talking about tens of thousands of people, that is a huge effort. Because we knew that we needed these vaccines so quickly, the federal government actually stepped in and helped with this recruitment process, which does not usually happen. It really expedited that recruitment process, which is usually very time-consuming. In addition, these vaccines, while the trials were going on and while they were being evaluated, while they were, the FDA was deciding all of that, they were being manufactured. Usually, a manufacturer is not going to begin that manufacturing process until they get the approval. But because we knew that we needed to act so quickly, the federal government basically footed the bill for the manufacturing to start ahead of time in the hope that they would be safe and effective and would be authorized for use. And that's why you've seen with these different vaccines, as soon as they're authorized for use, they've been able to ship out very, very quickly. And that's because that manufacturing process was started early. And that really has to do with the support of the federal government for this effort, which is not usually provided in an ordinary vaccine development process. So this is just a quick overview of the 3 vaccines. I think everybody's pretty familiar with them: Pfizer, Moderna, and Janssen. Janssen is the Johnson & Johnson. Some people call it Janssen, some people call it Johnson & Johnson. Pfizer was the first vaccine to be granted an EUA. That was December 11th. Pfizer is 2 doses, and those doses are 21 days apart, and it's authorized for use in people 16 years of age and above. Moderna, the FDA EUA was granted on December 18th, just a week later. It's also 2 doses. Those doses are 28 days apart, but you have to be 18 or older in order to receive the Moderna vaccine. Janssen was just authorized at the end of February. That is 1 dose, which is a big advantage, and it's authorized for use in ages 18 and above. Contraindications for all 3 of these vaccines. The only contraindications are basically if someone, meaning that these are the people who should not receive this vaccine, and it's people who have had a severe allergic reaction, like an anaphylactic reaction, after a previous dose of the COVID vaccine or to a component of the COVID vaccine. An immediate allergic reaction of any severity to a previous dose or known diagnosed allergy to a component of the vaccine. So if you know you're allergic to the vaccine or to a component of the vaccine, that's the only contraindication to receiving the vaccine. Now, there are a few other caveats in terms of timing. So if someone has an active COVID-19 infection, can be administered to those folks, but they need to meet their end of isolation criteria before they get vaccinated. So if you're actively ill, you need to have recovered and met those CDC requirements. Usually it's about 10 days after your test. in order to be vaccinated. Now, because there is a certain amount of protection, a certain amount of immunity conferred from natural infection, CDC will say that the individuals who have been recently infected, you can defer for up to 90 days after. But that's not necessary. That's a matter of choice, and it also could be a matter of prioritization of vaccine when there's limited supply. I did want to mention that these vaccines have been tested in people with underlying medical conditions, and any of the vaccines can be administered to folks with underlying medical conditions who don't have one of those allergic contraindications to the vaccine. Folks who were recently exposed, so if anybody's been notified that they've been exposed to a case of COVID and that they need to quarantine, then they need to just finish their quarantine before they get vaccinated, because we don't want anybody else to get exposed if that person happens to be infected and be infectious. People who have, though, received monoclonal antibodies or convalescent plasma as a therapeutic treatment for COVID-19, they should defer for 90 days after that treatment. Defer vaccination for 90 days after that treatment. It's really just because we don't know enough about it yet, and folks don't want there to be any interference with the immune response as it relates to the vaccine. So they're saying for right now to defer for 90 days, but again, someone who's recently infected is going to have that protection from natural immunity. So just wait the 90 days and then get vaccinated and be good to go. The vaccine side effects are very similar to what you might see for a lot of other vaccines. When you get your injection, there's probably going to be some pain the next day, a little bit of swelling. Some people have more systemic reactions, such as fever, chills, they get fatigued, they get a headache. And then there's some things you can do if your arm is sore, use a cool wet washcloth, or actually move it so it doesn't get too stiff. To reduce the discomfort from fever, drink plenty of fluids. You can put a wet washcloth on your forehead, that sort of thing, what you would typically do to make yourself feel better. So the next few slides, I'm trying to answer some questions that we received that we thought that this group might be particularly interested in hearing about. So where are we in the COVID-19 vaccination program? As Jenna already mentioned, we are in expanded phase 1B, and it now includes K through 12 educators and staff and early childhood staff as well. And this includes anyone who is on site. Teachers, as Jenna mentioned, it's going to be teachers, it could be kitchen staff, custodial staff, anyone who is on site at the school or the early childhood center. Now keep in mind that vaccine demand at this time does continue to outweigh supply because we're still receiving limited allotments from the federal government each week. So, but it's going to keep growing. The fact that Johnson & Johnson was just authorized, we actually already got some allotment of the Johnson & Johnson vaccine, and it's already been administered starting yesterday in Louisiana. And so it's just going to keep growing, but it's going to take time to get everybody in this priority group vaccinated. It could be weeks to months, but we will get there. This I just wanted you to know is on our website. If folks are curious, even though I know that early childhood folks and K-12 teachers can get it now, a lot of people are, wondering who else might be able to get it, thinking about friends or family members. This is available, this detailed information is available on our LVH COVID dashboard under vaccine info. So you can go, feel free to look at that. Of course, anybody who's age 65 and older, and anyone who is 55 to 64 that has one of these conditions here, if you're looking at the second column, the conditions that are listed on the right-hand side at the bottom. So anyone who has one of those conditions and is between 55 and 64, they can get vaccinated now as well. In addition, any woman who is pregnant at any age can get vaccinated now, which is very important because I will tell you, we have seen severe health outcomes among pregnant women here in Louisiana. That can include a severe illness in the mother, and it can also include preterm labor and fetal loss. So It's something we're monitoring very closely. We're still learning more about, but that is one reason that we have pregnant women in the priority group right now. This is who gets it next. Just if you're curious, you can always go on and look at this, but it's going to include, some other essential workers, food processing workers, postal workers, public transit workers, grocery store workers, those types of groups. So this is just some basic information, and I think that Jenna already shared this. Go to the vaccine, the dashboard. There's the web address there to find locations near you. For Walgreens, you have to use their online scheduler, and that is right there. If there's a waiting list, get on the waiting list. Very important, though, that you don't go to a location without an appointment. And you can, keep checking back on a daily basis, because those vaccine distributions and the vaccine availability does change every day. And I did want to just show you, when you go to that link, sort of what the list looks like. And you see up here, you can filter by parish. So if there's a particular parish where you want to go, just select for that parish, and it'll show you everybody who has received vaccine in that parish. Keep in mind, though, you don't have to go to a provider for vaccine in the parish in which you live. You can go to any parish. And also, I wanted to make sure everyone knows that the vaccine is free. Now, the provider can bill insurance or the federal government for the administration of the vaccine, but it will not cost anybody anything out of pocket to receive this vaccine. What should you bring with you? So after you register and you get a confirmed appointment, bring some sort of proof that you are an early childhood worker, K through 12 worker, an ID badge, a pay stub, something like that. If you are being vaccinated because you're in the 55 to 64 age group and you have one of those medical conditions that were listed, then you can download and bring a self-attestation form, or they should have it available for you there. But it's just a matter of saying yes, and signing, I do have one of these conditions. Wear some comfortable clothing, short sleeve shirt or something you can easily pull up, and you will have to wait 15 to 30 minutes after your vaccine, just because they want to monitor everybody for any kind of reaction. Be Safe is a smartphone-based tool, and you can register there when you receive your vaccine. And what it'll do is it'll check on you just to kind of make sure you're doing okay, and to find out if you have any problems or concerns, and be able to provide additional information you might need. But what's really useful, I think, is that it's going to help you keep track of if you're getting one of the vaccines that has 2 doses, the recommendation is that you stick with the same manufacturer. So if you get a Pfizer for dose number 1, get Pfizer for dose number 2. In a pinch, if you can't, really absolutely for whatever reason you can't, it's probably okay, but we haven't had that problem here yet. So first dose Pfizer, second dose should be Pfizer, first dose Moderna, second dose should be Moderna. Johnson & Johnson, you don't have to worry about it because it's 1 dose. But be safe. If you get one of the 2-dose series, it'll help you keep track of when you need to get your second dose, and also help you remember which manufacturer you received and which one you need to get. So it could be a useful tool. So these are just some common myths and misconceptions about the vaccine. So I've kind of already touched on this. Some people are concerned because they know, it usually takes longer to develop the vaccines, but those clinical trials were the same size. They follow the exact same procedures, and I've kind of already talked a little bit about why the process was able to be expedited a little bit in this situation. Some people have asked if the COVID-19 vaccines change your DNA, and that's because Moderna and Pfizer are mRNA vaccines, messenger RNA vaccines, but they do not change your DNA at all. These vaccines contain material from the virus that causes COVID-19. It tells our cells to fight COVID. It kind of helps them figure it out, help them remember. Nothing to do with our own DNA at all. There's always a concern about vaccines across the board about whether or not that vaccine can give you that disease. There is no live SARS-CoV-2 virus in this vaccine, in any of the vaccines. You cannot get COVID from the vaccine. Some people are asking, and they're really, really hoping, as soon as you get vaccinated, you can return to normal life, but that's not, unfortunately, the case. What we need to do is really reach what you might have heard people talk about as herd immunity. That's when enough people in a population are immune to a disease, and oftentimes these days it's through vaccination, where enough people are protected that it interrupts the chain of transmission and it prevents outbreaks from occurring. And so there are all kinds of sort of speculation about what is the level of herd immunity that's needed for COVID. And the general thinking at the beginning was that it's probably at least 70 to 85% of the population needs to get vaccinated in order to achieve this herd immunity, this sort of population level protection. I will tell y'all this though, I'm sure you've all heard a little bit about some of these variants of concern that are circulating, including the UK variant, which is becoming increasingly prevalent here in the United States. Some of these variants are more highly transmissible, and the more infectious a pathogen is, the higher level of herd immunity you need, the higher level of vaccination coverage you need in order to achieve herd immunity. So it might be, if some of these more highly transmissible strains become dominant here, we might need even higher levels of vaccination coverage in our population, more like 80, 85%, something like that. It's still too early to know. What we know right now is that the more people are vaccinated, the safer everyone is going to be. We are so lucky to have safe and effective vaccines, and I just encourage everyone who doesn't have one of those allergic contraindications to get vaccinated as soon as they're eligible and the vaccine is available to them. But until we reach that level, then we're really not going to be able to get back to life as we know it. You know, probably gradually certain restrictions will probably be lifted, but certainly not back to the way it was until we get lots and lots of folks vaccinated. Lots of questions about vaccines in general causing autism or cancer. I can tell you without a doubt, vaccines do not cause either of those things. I have 2 children and I have given them vaccines. I have read all of the data that has been published about autism as one of the big concerns that folks have. And I can tell you, without a shred of doubt, I firmly believe that they do not cause, I know they do not cause autism. And I've gotten my children every vaccine as soon as they were eligible. In fact, I have my daughter enrolled in one of the Moderna vaccine trial for children. I just have my fingers crossed that she actually got it. But we won't know for a few months. Okay, more common myths. You don't need a COVID-19 vaccine if you still had COVID. That is not true. You still need to get vaccinated if you've had COVID. We don't know how long immunity from a previous infection lasts. We're still learning a lot. The best protection is if you get a dose, or if you get a series, you get vaccinated, even if you've been infected. I can tell you, we have had reinfections here. We've had people who, after a certain period of time from their first infection, they've gotten reinfected again. It does happen. So if you've had COVID, you still need to get that vaccine. There's also a question about whether or not you need a COVID vaccine if others that have been around you have been vaccinated. Absolutely. Again, this goes back to that issue of herd immunity. Everybody, I would be happy if 99% of the people got vaccinated. We would be so safe. But as many people as possible need to get vaccinated in order for us to get back to life as we used to know it. In fact, the COVID-19 vaccines can cause infertility. They absolutely are not associated with infertility. I know there are a lot of concerns and questions among women of childbearing age about this. I can tell you that if I were pregnant, I would get this vaccine. Based on the data that I have seen, both in terms of risk to pregnant women that is posed by COVID and the safety data that are available. Pregnancy, like I said, is absolutely not a contraindication. The vaccines in Louisiana, we prioritize this group so much that pregnant women across the board, the vaccine should be available to them. So please know that. Bill Gates has planted microchips in the COVID-19 vaccines. In fact, he has not. I actually didn't know that that was something that people were concerned about, but he was not involved in the manufacturing at all, so we don't have to worry about that. Talked a little bit about this. When do we expect relaxing of restrictions? And this is when we see low levels of the virus being transmitted in the community, when we're no longer concerned about the number of hospitalizations and deaths that are occurring, and when we have lots and lots of people vaccinated, when we reach that herd immunity sort of goal. And those are all my prepared slides, but I'm happy to answer any questions if we have time for that.
Get that much back. That's what I'm saying. You carrying who's gonna be a waste of my baby name. You from job to job to job, and then jobs that you ain't even have for over 2 months.
Thank you so much, Teresa. If I can just ask everyone to please mute themselves to help with our background noise and interference. Teresa, that was super helpful and really, really informative. And we thank you for joining us today. I know those were all a lot of really burning questions and information that lots of people on the call were probably thinking and brewing with. So thank you for bringing all that today and coming just so prepared to address this specific audience and their questions. If we could ask you to just stick around for a little while, if you don't mind, we'll invite folks to put any questions in the chat.
Sure, I'm happy to do that.
You don't want to ask further questions. So Teresa, we have a question around what would happen if someone would have had COVID and they don't wait that full 90 days to then take the vaccine. What might some of those repercussions be? What are some of the thoughts that people might have if they have COVID or have had it recently but are really interested in getting the vaccine?
So you don't have, I think there's a lot of confusion about that point. I'm glad you asked that, Jenna. You do not have to wait 90 days after you've had COVID to get the vaccine. You have to simply be recovered. So for example, they call it the period of isolation. When you have COVID, you have to stay away from other people for a certain period of time. And if you have symptoms of COVID, then basically that period of time is you need to have recovered you need to be fever-free for at least 24 hours without fever-reducing medications. The rest of your symptoms need to be pretty much resolved, and you need to be at least 10 days out from when your positive sample was collected. So really, as soon as you meet those criteria for recovery, you can get the vaccine. What CDC has said is that if there's this real need to prioritize, or for whatever reason people want to wait a little while, they should still have some protection for 90 days after they were infected because of that natural immunity from the natural infection. But you do not have to wait 90 days. As soon as you've met that recovery period, then you can get the vaccine. When you do have to wait 90 days is if you've gotten those specific treatments. If you've had COVID and you've gotten the convalescent plasma or the monoclonal antibody treatment, that's when they do want you to wait 90 days. But if you haven't had any of that, then you just have to meet the regular old end of isolation criteria, and then you can get vaccinated.
Thank you. That really helps, that clarification. We have one other question that came in that I think is just an excellent question that I'm wondering myself is, how long will the vaccine last? Folks are wondering, is it like the flu shot that we're encouraged to get annually? So how long does this vaccine last in our systems?
I would love to have an answer for that from my own curiosity. The problem is with so much of COVID, we don't know. And I'll tell you one of the reasons we don't know. I'll be very honest with you. I believe that CDC was originally planning to So, well, first let me say this. There is one restriction that is eased when people are fully vaccinated, and that relates to quarantine. So once fully vaccinated people have been once someone has been fully vaccinated, so they are at least 2 weeks out from the final dose in a series. So if that's Johnson & Johnson, 14 days from that one dose. If it's Pfizer or Moderna, 14 days from the second dose. That's when you're considered to have the immunity for the full vaccination, for the complete vaccination. So after that period of time, between that period of time and 3 months after you get the vaccine, if a fully vaccinated person is exposed, they do not have to be quarantined. There are certain exceptions for people who who work in congregate settings like nursing homes or correctional facilities. But for folks who are working in early childhood or K-12 schools, if you are fully vaccinated and then exposed within that 3-month window, you do not have to quarantine following that exposure because you're considered to be protected. I will tell you this. Originally, I think CDC was planning to make that time frame 6 months, because I think they have a fair level of confidence that that immunity actually lasts longer than 3 months. And I think that that time period will probably be extended, but they wanted to start out with 3 months. And one of the reasons is related to those variants, because as we're seeing more and more variants circulating, until we get lots and lots of people vaccinated, they kind of want to wait and see, because there is a possibility that some of the variants, not all of them, but the vaccine may be less effective against some of those variants. Still seems to work very well, especially when you're talking about hospitalization and death. But there is still a lot to be learned about that, which is why I think they put that 3-month period on there. But I think that they will come out. I think we will learn that it lasts longer than that. I will be honest too, it could easily be a situation where it's perhaps something that we get yearly for a little bit of time. I think we won't know yet. I mean, keep in mind that we already have coronaviruses that are circulating. There are 4 different coronaviruses that circulate naturally in the U.S. And these sort of cause the common cold. And at some point, COVID will become, one of those endemic sort of commonly circulating virus, but it won't pose such a lethal and, a risk for severe health outcomes for us. And I think the role of immunization in the future, we'll just learn more as we go along.
Thank you for answering that. We have a few questions coming in around children. And so if you were able, of course, our providers on the call today work day in and day out with kids. And so if you have any kind of update that you can share about vaccinations in children, I know everyone would be happy to hear that as well.
So I'll tell you what they're doing is the trials with the kids, they are starting with the older age group. And so I think it's going to be those older age groups, high schoolers maybe, perhaps middle school and high school, that are going to probably have the vaccine authorized for them first. I would be very happy if we would get to that point maybe around fall. So if it could sort of hopefully coincide with the start of the next school year, I would be very, very happy about that. But they're enrolling the younger aged kids. So then they're going to, right now, for example, the trial that my daughter is in, it goes from 12 to 18, I think. And then they're going to enroll kids that are slightly younger than that, and then kids that are slightly younger than that until they get down to 6 months. But they're not starting out with the little babies, right? So what we'll see is that the authorization for these vaccines is probably going to be rolling according to different age groups for kids. But I'm hoping the older ones, which are the ones being enrolled in the trials first, may be available sometime in the fall. Hopefully, fingers crossed.
Thank you, Teresa. So this has been incredibly helpful. We thank you so much for being on with us today and for taking some live questions from those participating in the webinar today. So thank you, thank you. We are so grateful that you gave your time and all of this information for everyone on the call.
Oh, thank you. I'm always happy to join. I appreciate what all of you do so very much, so thank you.
Well, we will definitely have you back if you were willing.
Anytime. Bye-bye.
Thanks, Teresa. So we will move on to A few other updates. We're really excited to announce to you all today that we are starting to announce the LCAP relief grant for round 5. This grant is for type 3 centers and certified home-based providers that are operational and serving children by March 11th. And you see these details here on the screen. The grant amount is $300 per child in licensed capacity and $50 supplement per CCAP authorization. The deadline to apply is March 11th, and payments are anticipated to begin the week of March 29th, with the supplemental CCAP portion of the grant being issued the week of April 12th. So we are really happy to be able to announce to you all today the opening of the LCAP Round 5 grant. Leslie is going to put the application in the chat. You all should see that there. That JOT form has just been added to our chat, and that is the application for the LCAP grant that is now open. I want to also share that if you all have any questions throughout the remainder of our presentation, still feel free to add them in the chat. We will be taking questions at the end of today's presentation. So although we have ended our guest speakers time, Teresa talking about the vaccines from the Louisiana Department of Health, from here on out for our Louisiana Department of Education updates, we are happy to take any questions in the chat. We'll be taking those at the end of the presentation if you all go ahead and add those in. We are also announcing today the LCAP relief grants for non-CCAP certified providers. And so the LCAP relief grant for non-CCAP certified providers round 1. This grant is for non-CCAP providers who are operational in serving children by March 11th. The grant amount for this grant is $150 per child in licensed capacity, and the deadline to apply is March 11th. Grant applicants must register as a vendor with the Louisiana Division of Administration by March 22nd, and payments are anticipated to begin the week of April 19th. Type 1, Type 2, and non-CCAP certified home-based are encouraged to apply for Type 3 licensure or CCAP certification homes to be eligible for larger grant award amounts and to take advantage of recent increase to CCAP reimbursement rates and CCAP income eligibility limits. We also wanted to announce some additional grant opportunities. So we are looking forward in the months to come for some additional LCAP relief grants to occur in June, September, and December of 2021. So just in looking at the months to come, we are anticipating some more LCAP relief grants to be announced. And some additional grants, we are anticipating making 2 more grant opportunities available to Type 3 centers. And those are the Early Childhood Teacher Stipend Grant. Type 3 centers will be eligible to apply for a grant to provide teacher stipends to supplement pay during the pandemic, as well as the Accountability Participation Grant. Type 3 centers that participate in class observations this year, both local and P-card observations, will be eligible to apply for a grant to offset additional costs and the administrative burdens of participating in the accountability system this year. We are also asking you all to participate in the survey at the link on this slide. The Louisiana Department of Health, Office of Public Health, the Bureau of Family Health seeks to better understand the impact of the pandemic on people living in Louisiana. The purpose of the survey is to understand the challenges of Louisiana families with young children and learn about resiliency within families. And the feedback from this survey will guide an internal review of resources that families are accessing to ensure families' needs and that mental health needs are being met. And the link to this survey has also been dropped in the chat. We also have a few CCAP updates today. The department is extending CCAP payments to providers based on enrollment through the end of this calendar year. While CCAP has extended payments based on enrollment, we are still asking providers providers are still required to use either the TOTS point of service device or the interactive voice response system to track attendance. Remember that this is super important for you all to still continue to track your attendance, even though CCAP is being paid on enrollment. And just a reminder that failure to do so may jeopardize provider payments based on enrollment. Also to note, if future grants are available, like the ones we just talked about, providers failing to use TOTS or IVR will not be considered for those grants. So it's super important still to track your attendance so that we can really have a good handle on what children are attending every day. We also have an update around CCAP underutilized authorizations. So effective June 1st, CCAP will conduct an audit of LCAP grant recipients. The attendance for March, April, and May will be reviewed as a part of this audit. So the TOTS point of service device scans and the interactive voice response calls will be used to track attendance for the 3 months noted, March, April, and May. CCAP staff will contact families in writing initially and then by phone to determine if there is still a need for continued CCAP services. If families do not respond in the allotted time, their CCAP cases will be closed by June 30th and they will have to reapply for child care services. The CCAP Assistance Help Desk and the email and the TOTS Assistance email for Jackie Droddy 2@la.gov are all listed on the screen. So it's super important to inform our families who utilize CCAP that they will need to make sure to bring their children, and you all should track the attendance for March, April, and May as we are doing this underutilized authorizations. We also have a few licensing update. Effective July 1st of this year, the minimum child to staff ratios for children aged 2 and under in type 1 centers will be the same as the ratios in type 2 and type 3 centers. So as you can see on the table on this slide, you can see that shift from the minimum child to staff ratios in type 1 centers. Upcoming events will be included in our next newsletter. And we invite you all to continue to enter any questions in the chat. The contact info for licensing, CCAP, child care provider certification, child care criminal background checks, and our general early childhood support are all on this slide. So we invite you all to continue typing any questions into the chat at this time. And I will go ahead and turn over today's webinar to Taylor Dunn, our Deputy Assistant Superintendent of Early Childhood Strategy, to help in answering some of your burning questions.
All right, y'all, give us 1 second. We're going to review the questions in the chat box as we typically do, and then we'll come back on and provide some responses to your questions. So hang on with us for just a couple more minutes, and we'll be right back to answer some questions.